Well, here we are, another segment of Speaking Legally. What's up, brother Ed?
What's up, my brother?
As you all can see, Dr. Grant is here in body and spirit, but she's a little under the weather, and we wanted to preserve her voice for the holidays. There's a lot of singing that needs to going on, a lot of seminars and workshops that happen during the Christmas break and conventions and get-togethers, and we want to make sure that she has her vocal cords so she can share and have a healthy and happy holiday. So we taking over, Ed. Let's get busy. We taking over. The bridge is over. The bridge is over. It seems like it's like when the teacher leaves the classroom and they close the door and then they open back the door just to see what's going on. I think we got a little bit of that going on. So get the shade. Pull down the shade on the door because the door got glass. Pull down the shade so this way they can't see what's in here, and then we rock and roll. You know what I mean? So introduce yourself, Brother Pichardo, please.
Well, hello, audience. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. My name is Edward Pichardo. Welcome to Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. I'm sure you're going to find the discussion quite fulfilling, educational, as well as uplifting. So welcome this afternoon. Thank you for taking our time to listen to us this afternoon.
Great. Once again, this is Royce Russell, the other half of Speaking Legally. I want to thank you for joining in.
Or rather, the third.
Yeah, the third half, right? The third half, right? There we go. Here we come. It's coming in. Okay, back out for you guys that can't see this. Every now and then when we throw a red flag on it looks like the mic goes off and Dr. Grant wants to make an appearance. But Ed put it to rest. So the three of the three threes, right? There we go. And so anyway, I want to thank you all for joining us. Holidays are coming near. I want you to have a safe and happy holidays, as we approach a new year coming up. Speaking Legally, we'll be back again. It'll be 2022. And we know what to do, and you know what to do. Listen in and tune in. But today we're going to start off with a follow-up of Derek Chauvin, right? Yes. He had his day in federal court where he faced civil rights charges today. And it appears that former police officer has changed his mind. And this is normal practice. You have a criminal case in a state court. And if there's a presiding federal court case, which is of the same venue criminal, usually the state court case gets resolved first, either by way of disposition, that means a plea of guilty, or by way of trial. And we all know that this case was resolved by trial. This George Floyd matter was resolved by trial, for which I think Chauvin was definitely found guilty. And I think his sentence was 20 plus years, right? I mean, just to be on the safe side, I think it was 20 plus 15 or something like that, but 20 plus years. And so now he faces federal charges. And prior to his criminal state court case, he was pleading not guilty. Well, now I think he sees the writing on the wall. It only gets worse from here if he were to go to trial and lose. And so he did the appropriate thing, not only morally, socially, but just legally, by entering a plea of guilty and pleading guilty to 25 years. But we really don't speak in years in federal court. And as you know, we speak in months. Yes, so exactly. 300 months. That sounds a whole lot more than 25 years, 300 months, because it's 12 months in a year. That's a whole lot of time. What is interesting is that, and not abnormal, but just for our crowd, just for our audience so they can understand, is that this plea is to run concurrent with the state plea. So it's not like he's doing 25 years federal and then he's going to do 20 plus whatever 15 years in the state, which would be consecutive, one right after the other. It's a term that we use in a legal frame. It's called concurrent. So all the time runs together as one time.
And just for the edification of the audience, as was stated earlier, I mean, normally what happens in any criminal proceeding, either state or federal court, when the individual, the accused, is presented with charges, plea of not guilty is entered to preserve all rights, right? And then eventually, in many cases, an offer is made, a plea agreement offer is made. And at that point, that individual, if they choose to accept it, would then change their plea to guilty. And that's what's basically happening here. An offer was made, as my colleague Royce alluded to have it run concurrent. And so, and listen, it's really a matter of preserving resources here too, because I believe you would agree, Royce, that at the end of the day, what would have happened is in order to prove that federal case, it would basically have been a rerun of the state court case. Maybe different elements that had to be proved, but pretty much it was based on the same course of conduct, the same incident, and so it would have been a repeat. So just in terms of commentary and outlook. And given Mr. Chauvin's age at this point, I forget how old he is, but it looks like by the time he gets out, he's going to be pretty up there.
It's interesting that you mentioned the elements. I mean, this is what we call judicial economy. So here's a definition of judicial economy for our audience, right? Preserving resources, avoiding duplication, and avoiding doubling of judicial resources, court reporter, jurors, judge. And so, as Ed said, we had the trial in state court. Judicial economy says, well, we're going to have this same trial in federal court. What are we really doing here? Although the elements are different, as Ed stated, here they're looking at the unreasonable seizure, right? The unreasonable seizure which led to his death. And although federal court that's where the big boys play, that's where the real heavy hitters as far as penalties and punishment, proving this civil rights violation would probably have been quite easier than even on the state level as far as proving the second degree charges that he faced. Now, what is also interesting is that in state court, they had the trial, and he preserved this right to take the stand. He didn't take the stand. In federal court, in order for you to plead guilty, you have to allocute. Definition of allocute. You have to say what you did, what was your conduct for which you violated the law. So he had to state his conduct, which was tantamount or equal to depriving George Floyd of his freedom. He had to state what he did that was unreasonable in seizure that led to George Floyd's death. And let me tell you, that is not an easy thing to do. And it's one thing to sign a plea agreement to say that, yes, you are guilty of a charge and you are signing this agreement and you are going to jail. That's one hurdle. I can tell you from all my years of experience and talking to defendants, and unfortunately and fortunately, depending on the case, negotiating pleas and having them allocute in court is one of the hardest things, despite what they may tell you privately. It is like taking a square piece and fitting it in a round hole. It is very, very, very rough because the mind all of a sudden triggers that you have to say what you did wrong. And that mental gymnastics with the emotional overhaul of one, what your future looks like and what you actually did is incredible. And it always amazes me when we get to that point. The judge will say the charges, you violated 14 USC 1983 in that you unreasonably seized or you deprived George Floyd of, and you say yes. And then he says, well, tell me in your words what you did.
Yeah, and for you to get your client to explain what they did to fulfill the elements of what they're pleading guilty to can sometimes,
and that's not even being detailed in that you have to say this and you have to say that. by you just saying what you did, you can automatically feel the elements of the violation. But getting them to say that is the hard part.
Oh yeah, no question, no question.
I mean,
especially if you know, if there's maybe some nuance that this individual has been holding on to say, oh, you know, did I really? And it's like, listen, you know, do you want to accept this agreement or not? What exactly do you want to do? Do you really want to go to trial? No, I don't want to go to trial, but you know, so
do I have to say this?
Yeah. So what we doing here, you know?
Right. Like look, you signed the paper.
Yeah.
You're guilty. Now you have to tell the world you're guilty. What do you mean? Do I have to say this? Either you did it or you didn't. And if you did, then the world wants to know. And then nothing is going to happen until you say you did. And it's amazing how the confrontation with the truth is undefeated. The confrontation is always a 15-round fight. You know what I mean? You're always going to see the 15 rounds of not wanting to confront the truth. But the truth is undefeated because in order to move forward, in order to satisfy the plea, you have to state what you did wrong. And what's also interesting in this particular guilty plea and Chauvin's case, you know, in its entirety, is that what came up was his victimizing a juvenile back in, I think in 2017. He was 14 years old. Yeah. And that case was somehow bootstrapped as far as resolution is concerned with this plea. Now, a lot of people didn't hear about that case because some of those facts were kept out of the George Floyd matter. But, you know, I'm always amazed that when people get caught doing this, there's a segment of our society that believes this is a one-time thing. And I'm of the mindset, no, this is the one time he got caught. There's other times. And that proves to be, the proof is in the pudding by this other case that was out there that didn't get the attention, that was short of death, but yet still was an abuse. And probably even more of it was probably even, let me just say, long lasting because it happened to a juvenile who has to live with this for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you know, it's clear that he wasn't a stranger to this. This what George Floyd was an elevation of previous conduct.
So, that is true. That's a good way of looking at it. And what is also, because we always talk about critical thinking, right? Critical analysis, is his other co-defendants who are being charged with failure to intervene. Now, let me just tell you something. Personally, that's where you don't turn your head away from the movie. That's when the movie gets good. That's when that music goes. Dun, 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 dun. That is the climax. We got the bad actor. The bad actor's easy. It's the cohorts that stood around, that helped, that conspired. When you start getting those individuals involved, either one by way of criminality or civil, then you start to see, quote unquote, this wall break down. Because I don't want to be involved for just standing there watching it. So I'm ghost or I'm stepping in between.
So you're talking about some real transformation now occurring, because now the hope is that officers will say to fellow officers, listen, man, stop that. I'm not going down for you. If you go ahead and you do that, I am definitely going to prevent you, try to stop you from doing it and intervening, and then beyond that, reporting what you did.
Look, if there's no greater time to be selfish, wouldn't that be a great time to be selfish?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you gotta I'm of the principle in some cases that whatever it takes, because I mean, you try to rely on people's good nature and their better angels, but sometimes you have to appeal to their sense of self-preservation.
Shoot, I got a family to feed. Hey, what's up, Kevin?
And in this case, you know, maybe you don't care about none of these people in the community that you quote unquote supposed to be serving.
That's
but
right.
Maybe at the very least you care about your bank account, your home,
Right.
your little bratty kids at home.
That's right.
You know.
That's right. That's right.
And others that rely on you, and maybe at some point you decide, you know what, I'm not going to sit here and let you flush my whole life down the drain.
And you say it jokingly, and it does deserve a whole lot of humor, because, like I said, at what point is it time to be selfish, right? At what point? Like, that's the point.
Well, and we talk about this stuff in a lot of different contexts. Especially some months ago, we harken back to when we talked about the qualified immunity and people and these individual officers having to suffer some level of monetary reliability beyond what is settled for by and paid for by the municipality that they are employed by. When you have, say, an excessive force police brutality case where there's a settlement, and in what 99% of these cases, you got officers walking away suffering no sort of
2% rule,
ill effects of what occurred, and yet the taxpayers are the ones forking the bill. I mean,
right. I agree with you, and I will say this too. This is the time for you to be selfish, is that we haven't even looked at the cultural dynamic, right? If you have a white officer beating on someone of color in the community, and you have a officer of color standing by, now we know what happens in that. One, the person doesn't stand up, but now if the officer of color doesn't stand up, they face these penalties, and hopefully that'll incentivize and encourage them to say, no, this is all wrong. This is all wrong. And for those officers of color who think that they have the inside track on beating people that look like them from their community, oh, no, you better believe that officer who's Caucasian or Asian, that is not a person who's not of African-American descent, they're going to step in, because their economics is the end all be all.
And let's think about it. All of this is based on some sense of self-preservation, right?
Because yes,
most of these officers will say to you, "Hey, listen, I wanted to say something, but if I did, the retribution that I'm going to face from fellow officers and in my precinct locker room and etc., and the ostracization that takes place with officers who break the blue wall of silence, are pushed out of the department in many cases, harassed by fellow officers, given bad assignments, or harassed by superiors." That part of it is self-preservation, right? Because
yes,
you decide, hey, I'm not prepared to deal with all of that, so I'm just gonna stay quiet and keep my head down and just quote unquote do my job,
But when you say, look, you're going to face jail time, you're going to get terminated, then I think everybody, and look, when it came, and I'll make this analogy, and you can, break it apart or support it. When you look at movements, civil rights movements, and you look at having monolithic voices in our community, it happened during the time when everyone was facing, the majority of the people struggling, people of color in the 60s, 50s, even early 70s, the economic status was the same in a majority sense, right? And so it's easier to move when everybody's facing the same horrific conditions, right? When you have capitalism at its best, then you have people say, oh, no, I'm not for that because that affects me one way. And no, I'm for that because that doesn't affect me. But when everybody's suffering the same plight, it is easier to move. I say all this to say that if the officers who fail to intervene are going to be terminated, they're going to lose their jobs, that is a chord that every officer will agree with, and it will resonate with them. I'm not putting my job on the line either. That's right. You went and told, or you stopped and then intervened. Yeah, I would have done the same thing because I'm not going to forfeit my career.
Well, what I would say in terms of the example is this. One of the things that I've certainly heard from some of the older folks that I spoke to, older activists, is that what they've said to me is that back in the days, the price that you had to pay for being active was so much higher back then. I mean, in terms of you losing your job, losing what you had, being ostracized. In fact, any sort of activity back then, you were easily labeled a communist.
Oh no, I agree. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%.
That had all types of ill effects. Or I mean, not to say they don't do it now, but FBI, government call your employer. Next thing you know, you walking into your job, you fired. You're gone. I mean, so yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, it is correct that when folks face uniform disincentives for certain conduct, you hope and most of the time you will see some level of change in behavior when folks understand that it's no longer going to profit you to stay silent and not intervene.
Right, and you can. Yeah, and look, I'm not going to make a historical statement here that hasn't been said before. You can look at the women's rights movement, and you look at the civil rights movement. Right, it joined mutual interests, voice not being heard, and so that is the example that I placed before us when it comes down to failing to intervene. Right. The masses is going to say, I'm not losing my career. There's a joint interest. So we're not going to worry about whether or not we stick up for you in the locker room, because I'm faced the same situation. I'm not losing my career. Black, brown, white, Asian, you name it.
And be prepared for the spin, because there's definitely, because the way the PBA and the union spin it is that, you're making the job harder and people aren't going to take the job because it's too hard to do.
It's that fear thing again, right?
Yeah,
fear
I don't buy it. I don't buy it. It's not.
We don't want our community to be safe. We want lawlessness all over.
Yeah, but I doubt that people are going to stop taking that job. People find it to be a very good job.
And a lot of people go in there wanting to make a career of it, but when they actually get in there and start to do what they need to do, start policing, then it turns out to be a job, because they can't fight the elements to make it a career. Right? Those elements are too ominous. They're overpowering, and so when you have the lack of discipline, you have the problems that we see now, which brings us right into our next storyline. Where the culture meets the legal, and that's the NYPD seriously punished just 1% of the cops accused of misconduct. And that study was done by the NYCLU, New York City
Civil Liberties Union.
Right? New York Civil Liberties Union.
Yes.
The headlines might be shocking, but I don't think if you talk to any attorney that practice in this area of forced arrest, police brutality, or any person of color walk in the community, no matter whether middle class, upper class, lower class, it's not shocking at all. I'm surprised we even got the 1%.
And for our long-term viewers out there, if you recall, we did a show sometime back dissecting forensically the process in terms of the complaint, what happens with these complaints, and who do they ultimately go to. And this article highlights that continuing problem of it being laid at the door of the commissioner to act after they get the recommendation. And that's where the heart of the problem is. And so,
and Ed, can I just say something real quick? Hold that thought. So everyone who, if you're listening for the first time, as Ed said, we went through this before, but you're victimized by the police in whatever shape, form, or fashion, whether it's a false arrest, detention, whether it's excessive force, whether it is malicious prosecution, even if in a wrongful death situation. First step. Obviously, if you've been watching our show, you know we are of the mindset that you should always have an attorney on retainer. That doesn't mean that you put money down. That just means that you have a relationship like you would have with a family doctor, eye doctor, a school teacher, anybody in your community. You have that relationship with that attorney that practices in that area. That's number one. Number two, that attorney will guide you. And if you don't have an attorney, you should know that you should make a call to, in New York City, Civil Complaint Review Board. New Jersey, they started to develop something like that. In other states, there's been people have been galvanized to have those type of agencies. And that's where you file your complaint. And that's an independent agency that then will review the misconduct that you are asserting. That's the CCRB, the Civil Complaint Review Board. Then, usually you file a notice of claim. There's a time period for which you have to do so. In New York, it is 90 days. The notice of claim states why you are suing the municipality, why you're suing the state, and you're suing because of the misconduct that occurred to you. Then after that, you have a year to file your summons and complaint, and then you file it. During all that time and after, the CCRB is conducting their investigations. And what we have found out, just reading in the first paragraph, those who cannot see, I will read it for you. Proving NYPD impunity, reviewed 180 and 700,000 complaints filed with the CCRB and found that officers were disciplined just 4,283 times. That's how you get the less than 1%. So you have almost close to 200,000 complaints, and you have 5,000 times that officers are disciplined. And as Ed said, the most serious disciplines are at the foot of the commissioner. And this report doesn't speak to letters of admonishment. Hey, you did something wrong. You have to do it. Don't do it that way. Letters of recommendation of training. We talking about losing pay, vacation days, suspended, terminated, brought up on charges. That is less than 1%. And we go no further than in Minnesota with George Floyd. I don't think the internal affairs did anything, but for the media jumping on it. And we can look at many cases here in New York, whether it is Ramarley Graham, whether it is Eric Gardner, whether it is Kowalski Trawick, you name it. The discipline is far, 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 and few in between.
And excessively thin.
Excessively thin, correct.
And at the bottom of this article, as I was saying, there's a recommendation that, among other things, rescinding the police commissioner's power to make the final call in all disciplinary cases. Recommends police disciplinary cases not be heard in a trial room at the NYPD headquarters, One Police Plaza, but instead in the city tribunal where employees for other agencies face disciplinary proceedings.
Now, Ed, you know what that says to me? That says a couple of things. One, right? So they said 74% of the cases that administrative judge that works for the New York City Police Department. So let me backtrack. Let me act like Dr. Grant here. Let me put a pin in it. And for those, let's slow it down. We're taking you saying so much, all those words that she used. Let me kind of hear that in my brain. CCRB receives a complaint from you. They then go to investigate. Either they come to a variety of conclusions, unsubstantiated. That means not true, just didn't happen, couldn't prove it. Most likely couldn't prove it, not that it didn't happen. Uncooperative. Witnesses are uncooperative, cannot find them. The victim cannot find them, uncooperative. Substantiated. That's what we're talking about, substantiate and exonerated. Substantiation happens, then the officers put on notice that there will be a trial, a hearing, for which Civilian Complaint Review Board either has their own prosecutors or there is a set of prosecutors that are quote unquote special prosecutors. And I don't know how this works. And so that's why I really believe CCRB has their own prosecutors that work from or part of New York City Police Department that will then move forward in prosecuting the officers. The officer through their union, and this is how incestuous it is. It's just crazy, right? The officer through the union will either have private counsel or counsel that the union will appoint, right? And there are people that That's their job. They're legal counsels for the police department, and they will fight those charges. The administrative judge is a body of the New York City Police Department, although supposed to be independent. That administrative judge, after hearing all the facts, there is no jury, will then render a decision. So the article speaks to, one, where does that take place? That takes place inside in New York. Let's just say One Police Plaza, a small courtroom. Really can't have any audience in there. Nobody knows that it's even going on. It's on no calendar unless it's a press-worthy case where someone dies. It's not even in the press. So it can go on in a vacuum and you never even know what happened. Then, as I said, the incestuous part of it is all the players that define what is guilty, innocent. And then if you finally reach the pinnacle of that, an administrative judge does find the officer guilty, then that doesn't go to the mayor. That doesn't go to an independent body. That goes back to the commissioner who could say, yeah, I heard everything. I understand. And this speaks to what I'm about. Let me read this first. 12,980 times the NYPD in 74% of the cases ignored the recommended penalty and either impose a lower penalty or none at all. So that means 74% of the times that the judge found that the officer did something wrong, the commissioner said, nah, we're not going to do that, definitely. All right, you said 8 days suspension, we're going to go with 2, or nothing happens. Now, if that's not the dog chasing the tail, I don't know what it is. And that needs to be changed. And I believe this came up a little bit in trying to figure out who's going to be the next commissioner under the new under our new mayor come January. But we'll save that until we finish this article. So, as Ed said, let's put it out here in the public. Let's put it out here in the public. Let's have it in a big old courtroom in Bronx County and Manhattan. Let everybody come on in. Let Ed get his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'll get my peanut butter sandwich because, you know, Ed makes a little bit more than me. So I get my peanut butter sandwich. We'll roll in. You know, I have my oat milk. Ed will have his full vitamin D milk. You know, I got to squeeze my milk from a tree once again. You know, the economic difference here. Yeah, we go in there and we watch this trial. You know what I mean? It's bad enough there's no trial by his peers. So we watch this trial, especially if there's no criminal case. And then we see what's going on. Who knows? I may want to become a lawyer to work for the CCRB to prosecute these cases. How about that? Right? Exposure. Somebody out there may say, hey, I may want to become a lawyer to work for the NYPD to defend some of these officers. Exposure. How about that? Why is everything in secrecy?
Yep.
Let's make a deal. What's behind door number 1, huh?
No. This is listen, this has to change. And so, you know, and I hope this report drives that change. That has to change. We can't have the police policing themselves. It doesn't work. It's clear.
And so we say, come on down, Miss Sewell. Come on down.
Sewell.
Excuse me. Sewell.
Yeah, I say Sewell because individuals that I've known that have had that last name, that's the way they have normally pronounced it. So
is it Keyshawn? Is it Keyshawn?
I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't heard the actual news to have one of our professional media persons give the proper pronunciation. So
we'll go with Keyshawn
if we are mispronouncing your name.
Yes, definitely forgive us. So we'll go with Keyshawn Sewell.
Sewell, yes, 49 years old, chief of detectives for Nassau County, will become the first female commissioner of the New York City Police Department, a sister. Ooh.
Man, I want her to do so well, believe me. I want her to rock it and knock it out of the box. Let me just put my issue up front. I'm saddened that I never heard of her. That's the only thing that I can say. But I would imagine that Eric Adams looked at the resume and his closest and best confidants and advisors looked at it and said that she is ready to step up. because the time for change is like overdue and past. And this goes back to cardiac arrest, right? We talk about race is only skin deep. If everybody's swinging on the racial dynamic as to why police officers are not terminated, usually the commissioners are commissioners of people that are not color. You know, we've had commissioners of color way back when, right? I might have been 8 or 9 years old, right? But since practicing law, that has not been the case. And so people are quick to swing on the color, very, very easy way of distinguishing why things happen, why they don't happen. And so that will not be available. So now, is it the tradition of just being a police officer that prevents the lack of action, right? Serious action, like the 74% of the cases either being reduced or not listening to the administrative judge or being dismissed, even though the judge has come down with a decision as to what the penalty should be? Is it just the nature of being an officer that creates this inability to act? Or will we see a new day, a new age? I mean, look, I can tell you, we're going to see a new day and a new age when it comes down to education, you know, thanks to newly appointed or soon to be appointed Chancellor, David Banks. But this one, I do have a query. So help me out, Ed.
Well, you know, one of my concerns is not only do you have race as a factor here, as highlighted at the top caption of this article, first woman. Okay, and you know, as we're well aware, the NYPD, I believe the largest police force in the country, is majority men. Okay, regardless of race, it's men. And so I hope we don't have a sexism issue, even though there are women,
you know, we're going to have it.
Ranks of the NYPD, many top-ranking women. But, you know, I hope this isn't become a breakdown to an issue where this sister isn't able to garner the respect of those, I believe, 33,000 officers. And that they
who follow their lead from Patrick Lynch. So now you know what you know about Patrick Lynch.
Yeah,
union president in New York
City. So you got those issues. They're gonna, I would imagine, try to mask it with, well, she's never been in charge of a department this large. In fact, she only was in charge of 300 something officers in the detective squad in Nassau County. This is a different story. In fact, I think Patrick Lynch kind of alludes to it in some.
Well, he did a semi-endorsement, not one foot in, one foot out.
You got a big job ahead of you.
Yeah,
kind of thing. I hope you ready, kind of thing. You
know, it's the toughest job around, except for being a police officer.
Yeah, like wow, you know, like
really. So I was a police officer for 20-something years. Now I become commissioner. Now you're telling me the commissioner is the toughest job next to being a police officer. Well, I was that too, brother. I didn't come out born a commissioner. So why you even mention that? But that's where that tension starts to come, right?
Yeah. That's where that tension starts to, of course, rear its ugly head. And so, of course, now the question is whether, you know, Ms. Sewell is going to have the courage and fortitude to govern as a commissioner in an independent manner and not allow herself to be swayed or to shrink from the task ahead, you know, because we don't want a situation again where, you know, I mean, listen, we had high hopes for the de Blasio administration, you know, a lot of big talk, you know.
I remember when he hugged my client, Malcolm Constance, when her son was shot dead in front of his grandmother and 6-year-old brother. He hugged he was on the stage hugging. This had never happened again. Then 5 years later, it took almost 5 years, then some, just to have that officer fired.
Well, you know, all of a sudden you have these officers who are supposed to be working for the mayor turning their back on him and not being disciplined. I mean, I found it like I was incredulous. I was like, how how dare they do such a thing? And so, I hope that, that hasn't created a chilling effect in individuals who from here on end up leading that organization, because we can't have that. The hope is that Eric Adams, former law enforcement officer, NYPD, will garner the necessary respect and credibility and be able to then impute that to his commissioner. I'm a little surprised that, because a related story here, which I don't know if we're prepared to put it up or not, is Rodney Harrison, chief.
Yeah, well,
going to Suffolk County.
So the critical thinking mind, right? The jaded critical thinking mind, right? Says that why wouldn't he have been the person, right? What's going on behind? Once again, let's make a deal. What's going on behind door number one? Mm-hmm. Because he was moving up the ranks. I mean, you and I, just looking from the 5th floor window, knew that he was going to be tapped. And then all of a sudden, situations change, right? What happened? Is it all about it's time for a woman to take over? Is there something else that's in the mix that says that, look, we don't want this dissension, we don't want this power struggle? We don't have to worry about Eric Adams being worried about whether or not police officers will listen to him or guard him and turn his back. And it's going to be interesting to see how Patrick Lynch deals with that, right? Because he always talks about the mayor doesn't know what it's like to be a police officer.
Can't do that here.
Can't do that here, right? And because I know Eric Adams, he can care less whether you guys decide to protect him or not. He has enough retired 100 men in black in law enforcement that will jump up and service the need. So he's working as an independent body. Kudos for him. Now, can the commissioner do that? Can the commissioner?
And listen, for those that aren't aware, I remember when they were coming after Eric back in the day because of his criticism of the New York City Police Department. I mean, they came after him. They investigated him. They came after him. And he survived that.
So, and he's going to have to survive some more because mm-hmm. he's already stated some semblance of stop and frisk is coming back, and everybody has opinions about what stop and frisk is, and ineffective, effective. I think the numbers bear out that it's been ineffective, but what I always thought, no matter what the policy is, no matter what the policy looked like, the implementation dictates everything. The implementation spoils the milk or not. Whether it is life crimes, whether it is stop and frisk, whether it is broken windows, whether it is the combination of everything that we could think of to make a very safe and police community type of policing, implementation is on a rule.
And in all fairness to him, I'm not sure he's ever said, maybe I'm wrong. He's used the term stop and frisk in of itself. I think when it comes to Eric Adams, I think what he's looking at is putting back on the street certain police details that move about in the community, actually dealing with the proliferation of guns and weapons in the community. And targeting that, and like you said, a lot of it is going to be based on implementation.
You can call it whatever you want.
I had a conversation with a former police officer recently, and we were kind of going back and forth because he was, that individual was saying to me, "Hey, listen, we were able to get a lot of guns off of the streets," but I said, but at the same time, a lot of people's rights were violated, and we can't have that happen again. And there's a way to keep the community safe without violating people's rights. It's the way you do things. The community
is
wants
implementation.
safety, but not at the price of their respect and dignity. And there's a way to do these things. And so the hope is that, Eric Adams has the secret sauce. I know the other day I read.
Well, look. We know the other way. The other way that it was used didn't work, right?
So now we got to work. It resulted in the death of Amadou Diallo.
Right. So now we have to. So we know what doesn't work, and he's been around, and he knows what doesn't work. So the secret sauce is going to be a little bit of there will be some violations. There is no two ways about it. It just will be, because you're not going to be 100% right 100%. So that will happen. But is it palatable? Is it something that reasonable minds can understand? I dealt with a case where kids jumped out of a zip car and police thought that they stole the car. Get it? The police went after them, chased them. Got it. I understand you thought the car was stolen. But when you caught the kid and you just punched them in the face and knocked them out without saying a word to them, that's the problem.
Well. Listen, we're talking about that. We're talking about police officers approaching groups of people with little to no suspicion or cause, and disrespecting them without talking to them, asking them questions, addressing them as human beings. I got serious issues with that. I do like what I heard the other day from Adams, that he wants those beat patrols. He wants those cops on foot. I've always been very leery of officers running around in these vehicles, insulating themselves or separating themselves from the community. It was a feature of the 60s and 70s and activism in the community, and these cops, quote unquote, feeling unsafe and having to seek shelter inside of their vehicles and no longer interacting with the community. You got to get back to interacting the community. The community should know who their local officers are. They should know the merchants. They should know the community. They should know the children. They should know the parents. They should know who's on the block for good and who for bad. That's what needs to happen. So that's something that I like, subject to, of course, how it's implemented. But brother. Let's hope.
I don't know about You said spring on something. You could spring on to the next storyline, because internal or whatever it is far away. This is going to be a moving project. Look, it's interesting that you have a police officer as mayor and you have a commissioner, and they both know about policing, what happens next. But when you talk about being in the community and you're talking about policing, that is a great segue to our next story of Travis Hunter to Jackson State. An all-time stunner, Deion Sanders steals the #1 prospect from Florida State. So let's give the history. Deion Sanders played football as a professional and played baseball. His name was Prime Time. His name was Prime Time. He played with Atlanta. I forgot what baseball team he played with. I think did he go to Florida State or did he go to Miami? He went to one of the southern schools, right? I think he went to Florida, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And at that time, what was he playing for the Falcons? And was he playing for the Braves at the same time?
He played baseball and he played football at the same time. He played for Atlanta Falcons, and I think he played for the Atlanta Braves. Was renowned in both, superstar in both, right? Played.
Wasn't there a year where he had to run from a football game to
he had to go to a baseball game. Yes, that's right.
Playoffs.
It's amazing. That's right.
It's an amazing story to read about. I welcome folks to look at that.
He played football at Florida State or Florida. I think it's Florida State. And so he decided after his career, he's been on the air broadcasting, doing his thing, commentating, sport analyst. Excellent. You can't beat him. He knows the game. I mean, some of these guys know the game and they fumble and bumble as far as commentators and analysts.
Yeah.
He had the whole package, man. He's just fun to watch. He just really has the whole package.
Wonderful personality.
That's right. And
Charisma.
football players from all generations want to like sit by his side and have him interview him. You know, I mean, that's the thing. So he decided that he's going to go back and coach. And this is part of the movement. I call it a movement, and I think it will be a movement, is that he went to historically Black college, Jackson State, and he was one of the founders in making sure that they had a NFL Black college draft, combine rather, so they can see and get exposure and then either come on as free agents to football teams to try out or participate in the formal combine, but they have their own combine where you can see them. You know, and this is going back to Eddie Robinson days, you know, stepping in the area of like, we're going to do it and we're going to do it on our terms. And now he's the coach of Jackson State. And if you guys don't watch college football, you should, because now you see Black colleges are starting to get a little bit more airtime on ESPN. It's starting to get a little bit more TV time. You know, history is repeating itself because way back in the day, and not too way back in the day, the Black athletes from these colleges were making the pros left and right and were the foundation of the NFL. And so this story right here, Deion steals, and I don't even like the word steal, so let me just strike that. He recruits the number one, I think he plays cornerback in the state of Florida to go to Jackson State.
Which is big because, of course, as those of you who watch sports understand, the amount of just the things that get thrown at these high-ranking high school athletes by these Division I major programs like Florida State, you know, to woo them to come is huge. And for a relatively small school like Jackson State to be able to convince this young man to come to them is big because, you know, as Royce pointed out, during that period of time, you know, after that kind of de jure then de facto segregation that was taking place in terms of sports and these you know, majority white Division I colleges and then, you know, the pro ranks recruiting, you know, these Black players, you solely saw a siphoning of the best Black athletes, no longer going to HBCUs, but instead to these, you know, majority white institutions, to the point where there was basically what you would call a drain. Then, you know, you find HBCUs not being able to recruit the top athletes because they can't offer them what these other schools are offering them in terms of visibility. Let's be honest, you know.
And they can't offer them economics, like they don't have the best facilities. Why they don't have the best facilities? Because we don't recruit the best athletes. If we don't recruit the best athletes,
TV
then we can't be on TV. Then we can't be on TV. If you're not
Jackson
on TV,
State is not appearing on CBS, NBC, ESPN every week like Ohio State and at one time Nebraska and
or Miami University,
Alabama.
That's right. You know, so all that TV money is being funneled back into the school, which takes care of all the other sports, right? Title IX sports, takes care of swimming, takes care of water polo, takes care of soccer, takes care of volleyball, takes care of the facility, because those who turn pro want to give back to the school. So therefore they then drop a couple of $1 million, and now you have a great training facility that they'll go to when they're in the off seasons to train, to get away from the hysteria of pro football. And that circle, that money just going in the community and spinning around and just going in a circle in the community doesn't exist when it comes down to Black colleges, because they can't get the recruits. Hopefully this started the trend. Hopefully this will start other people to think otherwise. Unlike basketball, where you're mostly one and done, right? You go to a school, you play 1 year, you go. In football, you got to play at least 2 years. You know what I mean? You got to have a year of college football. And then after that, you could decide to go work out on your own. But usually people stay to have that second year. I'm sure the TV is going to be watching this young man, Travis Hunter, for a long time. Hopefully, he then goes pro and he starts to be what the Curtis Floyd, where he was to baseball, to, with free agency and starting that whole phenomenon.
You talk about Curt Flood.
Curt Flood, right. With the whole free agency. Let's hope that this can be a turning moment as well as far as college is concerned.
No, absolutely. This is a good look here, because I really do hope that we start seeing some of these top athletes coming out of high school, certainly considering these HBCUs. And when you have, say, a Travis Hunter at Jackson State, that is then used to recruit, other top, high school athletes to say, yo, come and play with us so we could really create a powerhouse here, I mean, it's just, and like I was saying, but, before the major desegregation in sports, you had like these, you had these powerhouses.
Oh, Grambling,
Grambling.
Everybody went to that Grambling game. I mean, that's where you had the pros coming out.
Well, you had that beautiful movie of University of Texas El Paso with that one team that won the NCAA tournament. I mean,
people forget where Doug Williams came from. You know what I mean? Where the wide receiver for the 49ers, I forget his name. He was great wide receiver.
Jerry Rice.
Jerry Rice. You know what I mean? Come on.
He came out of Mississippi, right?
Yes. Come on. This is what I'm saying. The gems are there. It's just an issue of getting exposure. And once you raise the competition, the level of competition among colleges, you'll see what we have to offer. And so what I would have to say is just keep your eye out on this. I think this is us turning a corner and seeing our own self-value and reinvesting in our own community. And
one of the things that I've always heard, I didn't attend an HBCU, but what I've heard about the HBCUs is those who have attended have stated to me that they felt like they went somewhere where they were considered and taken care of.
Extended family.
And so, these high school athletes, hopefully the parents who then have to have some input in these decisions say, you know what, instead of you going out there to that other school, I want you to go to that HBCU because I feel like I've been assured that they're going to look out for you and take care of you and make sure that, nothing happens to you and that you actually get what you go there to get, right?
Yeah. And so with that being the statement of the day, I'll phrase it. You actually get what you're going to get. And so that is our new term. When you turn on Speaking Legally, you actually get what you're going to get, right? It's just that simple.
Yeah.
That's right. So I will say my adieus to the audience now. Thank you for watching. Feel free to go to the replay and watch what you missed and watch other episodes that you missed so you can see us articulate what I think is important to our community, important to our culture, and legally relevant. So with that said, I'll see you guys next week. How about you, Ed?
Listen, folks. Oh, I just want to thank my brother Joey Brown. I saw you pop your head up in there. You and your wife Mia.
Ain't that something?
Today. And
I want to give a shout out to Steph Curry. Thank you.
Oh my God!
Yesterday,
Steph,
you know what I mean.
Who came from a small school, David?
That's right.
Nobody ever thought.
That's right. Play with the big boys.
For most 3-pointers.
Who they play last night? All right, so we're going to say good night to everybody.
Well, it happened at the Mecca, baby.
There you go.
It was destined to be that way, I guess.
That's right.
We almost beat them. It was a competitive game.
It was. Everybody was out last night. Reggie Miller, Ray Allen, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Papi Chulo, he was there. Paperboy to the left, he was there. Everybody was there.
Yeah,
all right, so we have one of our faithful saying, shut up. So that must be a commentary towards the MSG. So, great things do happen at MSG. That is correct. Correct. Just don't put it in my food. All right. So anyhow, we'll see you guys next week. That's my man, Ed Pichardo. I'm Royce Russell. You can reach Ed Pichardo at a law office of Ed Pichardo. You can reach me at Royce Russell ESQ. Peace to everybody. Take care and be well.
Take care. Happy holidays.